Hello, everyone. Back with an unedited video to answer a question that was posed to me by Maya, who's one of the wonderful people in my membership community. And Maya asked what recovery looks like. So I really had to sit down and think about this one before answering it because I've never really seen two people do recovery the same way. It's really quite different for different people. But after doing some thinking about it, I think that I've put together some common threads, some common stages that I see people go through. But I want you to hold these stages relatively loosely. So I know that recovery stories and videos like this one are very important to you as you're recovering from symptoms of chronic dizziness, whether that's from PPPD, chronic migraines, or from things like MdDS-type symptoms. But I want to remind you just to start that the path is your own and it's never going to look just like someone else's. So when you watch those recovery stories or when you listen to a video like this one, you can see yourself in the video, but know that your path is going to look a little different because every path looks just a little bit different. So the first thing that I noticed, the first stage, in my opinion, of recovery is when I see that someone has hope. After being exposed to a lot of negativity, sometimes from your physicians who are well-meaning but really just don't know how to deal with these kinds of chronic conditions, or from physical therapists who take a very pathology-based approach and basically say there's something wrong with you, or from internet support groups. Many people find me or find similar thoughts about healing after having been exposed to a lot of negativity. And that little spark of hope that happens when you think, what if I could actually get better from this? That's the first stage of healing. So if you're already there, congratulations. You've already completed stage 1 of healing. The stage 2 that I identified is when people start to have the tug of war between acceptance and doubt. And I'm talking about this explicitly because doubt is built in as a symptom with your dizziness. So I know that sounds kind of strange because you think you have doubt about your dizziness, but I like to think of doubt as a symptom, like having visual symptoms or having swaying or bobbing or having head pressure. Doubt is another one of those symptoms. You're going to put it in the symptom bucket along with those other symptoms. And here's why. We know that neural circuit dizziness is caused by this fight, flight, or danger and alarm signal that's just kind of going off in the brain more than it should. And that's triggering this dizziness response. Your brain is doing this for a reason. It's not just randomly doing this to torture you. It's doing this because it perceives threat. So the fight or flight response is an adaptive response. It's there for a reason. We have this in us as human beings so that we can survive when something threatening happens, so we can run away when something bad happens, or fight something when necessary. So this fight or flight response is actually trying to protect you. The symptoms of dizziness are an unfortunate consequence of this, but that part of your nervous system is trying to protect you. It can only protect you when you believe it's protecting you. So, for example, okay, if my nervous system says, run, there's a tiger, and I'm like, I don't believe you, I'm not going to run, and a tiger eats me, not good. Not good, okay? So your brain uses very, very convincing mechanisms, very convincing physiological changes in your body. So not fake, I'm making this up, oh, it's not real, my brain's just crazy. No, your brain uses very real physical responses to get your attention and make sure you get out of there if there's a threat. So if you're sitting around doubting your fight or flight response, you're not going to survive for very long. So doubt is built in to this syndrome. Doubt is a part of neural circuit dizziness. Feeling like there's no way that something can't be horribly wrong with you is part of the symptoms. Okay? So Everyone has doubts. Everyone who gets this kind of diagnosis is going to be like, no, there's no way. There's got to be a tumor in there. There's got to be something that a doctor can fix. There's got to be something actually horribly physically wrong that's making me feel this way. It's built into the syndrome. But as hope comes in and you start to learn more about neural circuit dizziness, there's also this process of acceptance. Oh my gosh, I meet the profile of someone who has neural circuit dizziness. Oh my gosh, my symptoms change and they're not logical. And why did I get a stomach ache and then suddenly I had a headache? And that doesn't make sense. That wouldn't be from a tumor. That doesn't make sense. As you start to accumulate all this evidence, you suddenly start to delve into this acceptance that this might be what you actually have. And that also kind of builds on the hope too. Oh my gosh, there is hope, and this is actually me. The doubt and the acceptance are in this tug of war in stage 2. For some people, this is very brief. They see one of my videos and they're like, oh my gosh, this is me. She's talking directly to me. And then they move on to stage 3. For other people, this is a very long process. So that doubt is part of the process. Don't beat yourself up about it. It's part of the process. That tug of war between doubt and acceptance is 100% a normal part of the recovery process. As that tug of war starts to pull a little bit more over to the acceptance side, you start to enter stage 3. And you might kind of find yourself going back and forth between stage 3 and stage 2. But you're going to start to enter stage 3 when acceptance is starting to win out. Okay, well, maybe there is something to this. Maybe there is something about stress that might have caused some of these symptoms. Maybe there is some kind of emotional thing that I wasn't addressing. And that's when people begin stage 3, which is that discovery process. So discovery is when you are looking at all the evidence and you're like, holy moly, actually I was kind of under a lot of stress. Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I wasn't dealing with this particular emotion that was really difficult for me. So that discovery process for some people is very quick. Again, they kind of go through all 3 stages really quickly and they get to stage 4 really fast. And stage 4 is when we start to see changes in symptoms. For other people, the discovery process is a whole lot longer because they've lived through a lot more. And it's not fair. And I know that it's really, really hard. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. I've seen people who have years and years and years of trauma and horrible stuff go through discovery relatively smoothly. And I've seen people who had relatively smooth upbringings have a lot of trouble in this stage just because they've been repressing everything for a long time. So there's no timeline for this discovery process, but you're going to know you're on the right track as you start to see changes in your symptoms. And I've discussed this in previous videos, but when I say changes in your symptoms, for many people, that means your symptoms start to go down. They start to wane, okay? For others, not necessarily. First, often the symptoms will start to shift around. So like another one of my clients, you might find that you'll go from being dizzy to having headaches, or to having pressure behind your eyes, or to having leg pain. Some of your symptoms will strangely start to shift around a little bit. You might find that your symptoms intensify temporarily, and I'll link to a video below where I talk about why that happens and why it's a good thing. So don't worry if that's happening to you. That is part of the recovery process. But I would say the pattern that I see most frequently is that people start to notice ups and downs in their symptoms. So they may not go completely away. Totally fine, totally part of the recovery process. But what I'll notice is they'll start to say, yeah, actually my symptoms were a little lower yesterday. And then they came really high back up. They came back with a vengeance, and then they went down again, and then they came back up. Those little spikes are big time stage 4. That's real recovery. That is what it looks like. Okay, it's almost never this linear, like, oh, they just kind of faded away and I danced off into the sunset and it was wonderful. I love to see that. So it does happen sometimes, but for most people, it's these spikes. And I want to also remind you that when you're doing spikes, the dips are going to feel even worse than they did before, not because the symptoms are worse, but because in comparison to feeling great, it's going to feel awful. But you just need to keep reminding yourself during those dips, this, at least according to Dr. Yo, is 100% part of my recovery process. This is how it looks for most people. And my hope is that as I start to convince more and more people to be interviewed by me, that you'll be able to see people talking about this pattern, because in retrospect, it might not be something you remember as clearly. You're going to kind of remember this gradual getting better process, but those dips and spikes are actually what happens a lot in the moment. So if that's happening to you, you are on the right path. And again, if you are having a temporary intensification of symptoms or they're shifting around, watch my other video where I talk about this. All right. What I can tell you is that as people go through these stages, again, sometimes they're going to go back and forth between two stages, there is a march toward better. And for some people, that better first appears when they aren't as angry at their symptoms. They're just coping better. Okay, that's not where we're stopping. That's not where we're stopping, where you just feel better about the symptoms, but they're still there. Okay, that's actually not where we're stopping. But that is a good sign of progress. When that starts to happen, that means that your nervous system is learning to come out of danger mode, which is going to be what stops the dizziness. So for you, even just looking for those small signs that you understand the symptoms more and that they're not as scary as they used to be, even if the symptoms aren't quite changing yet, that is also a part of recovery that is a kind of an in-between stage for many people. Over time, the symptoms get better. They get better and better and better until they are no longer a concern. Once your brain has that pattern, kind of stage 5 maintenance, when you're out of it and you're back to living your normal life, once your brain has that pattern, it can go back to it at times of stress. But then if you're staying in touch with yourself and you're managing stress well, it's just a barometer. Hey, oh, oops, I'm stressed out now. I'm starting to feel a little dizziness. What do I need to take care of? What needs aren't being met right now? What kind of stress might I be able to help mitigate right now? People, for example, with migraine headaches, which, as you guys know from my previous videos, I have had, I suppose. When I get a migraine, it's a pretty good sign that there's something I'm not dealing with. Or sometimes it just happens and that's life, because this is how my brain chooses to manifest stress that I have no control over. So know that you will feel dizzy in the future, but dizziness isn't something you want to get rid of. It's something that your brain does as a protective mechanism. It's actually very important, even for people who don't have chronic dizziness, to get dizzy. There's a reason we get dizzy. It's our brain's way of saying stop. So we don't want your dizziness to completely go away. You want to be able to have a brain that can do dizzy. We just don't want it to be persisting all the time. So yes, you may experience dizziness at some point in the future, but it's not going to rule your life. It's not going to be all the time. It's not going to disrupt you every time you walk into a supermarket or try to turn quickly or try to do exercise or even stand on your head. It's not going to happen like that anymore. That's what recovery looks like in the long term. You go back to living a normal life and have sensations every once in a while like anyone else does. Drop any comments or questions below, guys. Thank you for tuning in. I'll talk to you soon.